They didn't just try to play you, they studied you, tracked your patterns, and rehearsed their attack like it was theater. This wasn't clumsy, this wasn't random, this was calculated. Every fake smile, every forced compliment, every moment of false support, all of it was bait. They wanted you to feel safe, to lower your guard, to believe they had changed. But they didn't change. They just upgraded the mask. What they didn't realize was, you don't operate on surface energy anymore. You feel what's real before it's ever said. You know when the air shifts in a room. You know when a handshake means betrayal, when a compliment has poison behind it, when silence is louder than words. They thought they were playing chess. You were watching the entire board from a higher level. And now they're furious because the trap was perfect, except for one thing. You saw it. They thought they had you wrapped. Instead, they're the ones unraveling. Chosen one, if this message is already hitting home, press the like button and subscribe right now. Let's spread this truth and make sure this voice gets louder. You're not alone, and this mission isn't over. Back to it. They were counting on your trauma to blind you. They hoped your loneliness would make you reach for anything that felt like love, but you didn't reach. You paused, you waited, you listened, and in that silence, the truth revealed itself. Their timing was too perfect, their words too smooth, their kindness too convenient. That's when you knew this wasn't love, this was set up. Psychologists call it trauma targeting, when manipulators pick people with deep empathy, soft hearts, and wounded pasts, thinking they'll be easier to deceive. But what science also says, those same people develop the highest pattern recognition. They notice the tone, the delay, the shift in eye contact, the slip in a story. You didn't catch them by luck. You caught them because you've lived through worse. They were banking on your downfall. They had the whole plan set. The betrayal, the blame shift, the smear campaign. Some even wrote fake stories about you before the story had even happened. They built the narrative before the plot. That's how arrogant they were. That's how confident. But when you didn't fall for it, when you didn't react how they predicted, they panicked. You see, most people give their power away by trying to explain themselves, defend themselves, or fix what others broke. But you didn't explain, you didn't beg, you didn't even argue. You watched the pieces fall, and you let the silence scream. That silence, it's haunting them, because it proves you weren't asleep. You were awake the entire time. You were playing your part, but taking notes behind the curtain. You were nodding, but not buying. You were hurt, yes, but you were documenting every piece of the game. And when the moment came, you did what they never expected. You walked away, not with revenge, not with drama, but with that cold, clear energy that says, I know exactly who you are, and I no longer need to carry the weight of pretending I don't. That's what's driving them mad. Not just that the plan failed, but that it failed in silence. No reaction, no chaos, just truth, standing alone like a mirror they can't smash. This is where the shift happens. This is the moment they realize they didn't break you. They revealed you. And now that you've seen the game for what it is, you can never unsee it. You're moving different now. Your smile is quieter. Your circle is smaller. Your standards are steel. The version of you that would have fallen for that trap. That version is gone. Dead and buried under every time you bit your tongue, ignored your intuition, or gave them one more chance. You're not angry anymore. You're sharp. You're not hurt. You're awake. And you're not chasing peace anymore. You are peace, the kind that's earned through fire. They don't know what to do with that, because the more they try to provoke you, the calmer you become. The more they try to drag your name, the louder your silence hits. The more they try to copy your light, the more obvious their shadows become. They set the perfect trap. But the moment you stepped into it, you smiled, because you already knew. And now, you walk forward with clean hands, while they're left with the mess they made for you. And now, if you're still here, then I already know what you are. You're not just curious, you're locked in. You felt every word like it was pulled straight from your own memory. That's how chosen ones move. Quietly, deeply, with no need for applause. If the trap didn't break you, if it woke something up inside you, then stay right here. Don't click away. This goes deeper, and the further we go, the clearer it becomes. They didn't just fail to trap you, they exposed themselves. Drop the number 777 in the comments if you're done being the target and ready to become the force. Let's break this down step by step. No fluff, no filters, just truth. Raw, sharp, and in your face. Because if you saw through their game once, you'll never unsee it again. Let's get into it. Number 1, they took your silence for stupidity. Now they're choking on their own underestimation. You were never blind. You were busy counting the knives aimed at your back and memorizing every hand that held one. They saw your stillness and called it weakness. They saw your patience and mistook it for fear. They laughed behind closed doors, thinking they'd fooled you, that their fake smiles, their backhanded praise, their well-timed compliments had kept you in the dark. But the joke's on them now, because you weren't confused. You were watching, you were listening, you were absorbing everything they thought they were hiding, and now they're spiraling. Because they realized too late, the quiet one was the most dangerous one in the room. They underestimated the one who didn't always speak up. The one who didn't expose their hurt, the one who smiled through the games, who clapped while being used, who showed up even when they weren't being appreciated. To them, that was weakness, softness, blind loyalty. But in truth, that was tactical patience. That was strength disguised as surrender. That was the art of war, played from behind a calm face. Because chosen ones don't bark back. They bite when it matters. You weren't sitting in silence because you didn't know what was happening. You knew everything, every shift in tone, every rehearsed excuse, every fake apology dressed up in guilt manipulation. You picked it up long before they thought you noticed. You just didn't flinch. You let them finish the performance. That's what terrifies them now. Because the truth is, you were never the fool. You were the mirror, and they couldn't handle what it reflected. Your empathy gave them rope, and they used it, not realizing the more they spoke, the more they showed their hand. You gave them the space to reveal their real faces, and they did, proudly, arrogantly, loudly. Now the same silence they once mocked is haunting them. They're rereading old messages, scrubbing their timelines, reaching out to others to check in. Why? Because now they know you knew the whole time. And what makes them panic the most is not what you said, it's what you didn't say. That's what chosen ones do. They move like shadows. They let the enemy dance, thinking they've won. Then they flip the whole script, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. You never needed revenge. You needed clarity. And the moment you saw the trap, you walked through it untouched, while they waited for an explosion that never came. But now, they're the ones exploding. Quietly, internally, emotionally. They're choking on the same lies they once fed you, because the reality has hit. You saw it all, and walked away without giving them the satisfaction of a scene. No rage, no breakdown, no begging, just power. Quiet, unshakable power. That's what breaks them. That's what flips the guilt onto their side. They thought you were soft because you had a heart. because you forgave, because you gave chances, because you kept showing up even when you weren't being met halfway. They didn't realize that kind of heart only comes from someone who's been through hell and survived it. You weren't weak, you were disciplined. You weren't stupid, you were strategic. Let them talk now. Let them spin the story. Let them scream into empty rooms. You don't owe them a defense. The truth is already echoing without your help. And here's the brutal fact that eats them alive. You never needed to expose them. They exposed themselves. You just let it play out. And that's a different level of power. Because real power doesn't prove itself. It just walks away and lets the silence finish the job. They'll try to convince others you were too sensitive. They'll say you overreacted, that you read too much into things, that it was just a joke. But deep down, they know. You read them like an open book. You caught the pattern. You tracked the games. You documented the tone switches, the sarcasm laced with venom, the weaponized jokes. You didn't just feel it, you studied it. So now they're scared. Scared of what you saw, scared of who you've become, scared of how calm you've stayed. They want a reaction. They want chaos. They want you to fight them, cry over them, expose them. But you won't, because you're above that now. And that's what makes them burn the most. You outgrew the game. You outgrew the trap. And you outgrew the need to prove anything to anyone. They took your silence for stupidity. But now, in their panic, they finally see your silence was the smartest move you ever made. They forgot one thing about chosen ones. We don't announce our awareness. We sit, we wait, we learn, and when the time comes, we walk away with everything they tried to steal. Our peace, our clarity, our dignity, our future. They never saw it coming because they were too busy mocking the softness. Now, that softness is the blade pressed against the truth they can't run from. So let them choke. Let them tremble. Let them stew in the fallout of their own plan. You're not stupid. You're not soft. You're not naive. You're the one who saw it all and still chose to rise. And nothing is more dangerous than someone who can see the darkness and still choose light. This is only the beginning. You've already won, and they can feel it. Number 2, you let them build the whole trap, then you let them fall into it. You didn't just survive their setup, you studied the blueprint and let them trap themselves in it. A real threat doesn't interrupt the show. They let it play out, then expose the ending. They thought they were being clever. You were just being quiet. Letting them dig deeper wasn't passivity. It was precision. They thought they had the upper hand. You saw the red flags, the inconsistencies, the carefully placed lies. But instead of confronting them too early and giving them a chance to escape, you stayed calm. You let them keep building. You let them write their own script, thinking they were in full control. And now, they're trapped in the story they created, and the punchline is on them. You didn't rush. You didn't panic. You knew what most people forget. Exposing a snake requires patience. Catching a manipulator takes more than instinct. It takes evidence. And you didn't just gather proof. You let them hand it to you gift-wrapped, thinking you were too naive to notice. Imagine this. You're standing in a room and you can smell smoke. You know there's a fire behind the wall, but no one else sees it. If you scream too soon, they'll call you paranoid. If you blame someone without proof, they'll cry innocence. So what do? You wait. You let the smoke build, let others start coughing, let the flames finally crack the surface. That's how exposure works, not by yelling, but by watching the lies collapse under their own weight. That's exactly what you did. While they schemed behind your back, you gave them rope. While they whispered with fake concern, you kept quiet. While they created drama in your name, you smiled, because you knew the more room you gave them, the more they'd reveal themselves. And now it's all out in the open. They staged their concern, they coordinated their deception, they built an entire network of lies, thinking you were asleep. But the truth is, you were more awake than ever. You noticed who stopped checking in. You felt the energy shift when your name came up. You saw how certain people became distant for no reason. You didn't say anything, not because you were scared, but because you were busy building something stronger than revenge. Clarity. You were waiting for the full picture to come together, and now that it has, they're scrambling. They're caught in their own design. And the best part, you didn't even lift a finger to destroy it. You just let them finish what they started. They can't twist the truth anymore. They can't gaslight you or others. They can't rewrite the narrative. Why? Because they wrote the entire thing in their own handwriting. The messages, the actions, the silence, the two-faced conversations, all of it. They exposed themselves with time, and now they're wishing they'd never played the game at all. You didn't react because you weren't shocked. You were documenting. You didn't need to confront them. You didn't need to fight. That's what they wanted. Drama, chaos, confusion. But you didn't give them the satisfaction. You let them operate in their own illusion. And when the mask finally slipped, they were too deep into the role to switch characters. Now their panic is real. Their shame is eating them from the inside. Because it wasn't just that they were caught, it's how they were caught. In silence, in peace, in clarity. That's what chosen ones do. You don't destroy your enemies with noise. You let their own echoes collapse around them. You let the setup complete, because only then can the truth be undeniable. They thought your quiet was ignorance. They didn't know your silence was surveillance. They thought you were disconnected. They didn't know you were documenting everything. They thought they had you dancing in the dark, but you were just waiting for the lights to flip on. Imagine a spider weaving a web around someone they think is asleep. Every thread is laid down with confidence, arrogance even. The prey doesn't move, doesn't flinch. The spider celebrates until the prey opens its eyes and walks right out, untouched. That's what happened here. They built their web around a soul that was never stuck to begin with. And now they're the ones tangled in it. Now they're the ones looking over their shoulder, wondering who knows what. Now they're the ones trying to explain things that no longer make sense. They're editing captions, deleting posts, dodging conversations. Not because you exposed them, but because they know you could. Any moment, with receipts, with truth, with your silence as proof. That's what makes them scared. That's what makes them furious. That's what makes them feel powerless. Because you didn't fall into the trap. You let them build it around themselves. And there's no coming back from that. Not with lies, not with apologies, not with fake healing arcs. Because chosen ones don't need to get even. They become so undeniable that the enemy's lies just sound ridiculous in comparison. They were playing a short game of deceit. You were playing the long game of truth. You didn't shut the door in their face. You just let it close itself while they were busy talking behind your back. They set the stage. You let them perform, and now they can't escape the role they created for themselves. So if you're wondering if you should have spoken up sooner, no, you did exactly what needed to be done. You let the mask fall all the way off, and now the whole room can see what was really behind it. That's not revenge, that's justice. That's the power of letting the lie complete itself. And what's next for you? You keep walking. No need to explain, no need to defend, no need to prove anything, because everything they did is loud enough now. Everything they built fell apart without your help. You didn't have to push them. They fell by their own hand. That's the beauty of restraint. That's the genius of patience. That's the gift of being chosen. You let them finish the setup, and now they're trapped in the ending they wrote for you. But this is your story now. You flipped the script, and they'll never get the pen back. Number 3. They designed the trap for the old you, but you don't live there anymore. They aimed for your scars, but you showed up with armor. They didn't study you, they studied your history, your weak points, your mistakes, your regrets. They watched the version of you that once second-guessed everything, the one who kept giving chances even when it cost peace. The one who apologized just to stop the silence from turning into war. That's who they built the trap for, not you now, but the you that used to bleed in silence. They thought you'd fold the moment they brought back old feelings. They thought if they stirred the right memories, touched the right nerve, you'd crawl back into that cage of self-doubt and stay quiet. What they didn't expect is that you don't live there anymore. That version of you is dust now, buried under every sleepless night, every betrayal you outlived, every breakdown that didn't finish you. The trap failed because the target evolved. They tried to bait you with guilt, but guilt doesn't work on people who've faced themselves and done the work. They tried to manipulate you with reminders of who you used to be to them, but you're not nostalgic for a version of life that required you to shrink. They came with the same old tricks and expected the same old results. But you weren't playing that game anymore. You changed the rules. You became the rule. Imagine this. They built a cage, designed for a bird they thought still had broken wings. But when they opened the door, you didn't fly in. You watched from above. Because while they were watching your past, you were building your future. While they were counting on your desperation, you were learning self-respect. While they were rehearsing the perfect pitch to pull you back, you were learning how to stand alone without shaking. That's why the trap didn't catch you. It was never meant for who you are now. They underestimated the power of someone who went quiet, not out of fear, but out of evolution. The kind of quiet that comes when a soul finishes its healing, not its grieving. You don't respond to chaos the way you used to. You don't stay in places that drain you. You don't ignore red flags just to keep the picture looking pretty. That old self, gone, grieved, buried, honored, but never re-invited. So now they're looking at you confused. Why aren't you reacting? Why won't you argue? Why does your silence feel so final? Because it is. This time, you're not being quiet to keep peace. You're being quiet because you are peace. They set the stage for your old role, but you walked in as the director of your own story. This version of you doesn't tolerate the things you used to. You don't flinch at being misunderstood. You don't run back just because someone pretends they've changed. You don't negotiate with energy that disrespects your growth. And when you feel the bait being dropped, you smile because you know it's not about love. It's about control. And you're done being controlled. They built the perfect trap for someone who doesn't exist anymore. And now the only one who's stuck is them. Number 4. They tried to weaponize your wounds, but you turned them into wisdom. They knew your pain, but they didn't know you healed. They dug through your past like it was a playbook. Every trauma, every trigger, every moment of weakness, they thought if they pressed hard enough, the old version of you would come out crying. They weren't just trying to hurt you, they were trying to rewind you, drag you back to the version of yourself that didn't know better. But here's what they didn't see coming. You didn't just survive those wounds, you studied them. They thought pain would break you, but you made peace with your pain. And that made you unbreakable. They tried to use your past like a remote control. Push a button here, make you feel small, say this word, trigger guilt. twist that memory, ignite shame. But what they didn't realize is that you've already been there, and you don't live in that mental prison anymore. They were aiming for scars, not knowing those scars had become steel. They rehearsed your breakdown, but you rewrote the scene. They were ready for the meltdown, ready for you to lose it, snap, beg, cry, fall apart. That's the power trip they were counting on. That's what gave them a sense of control. But when you didn't react, when you met their performance with silence, it cracked their whole strategy. Because silence from someone who used to bleed loud is terrifying. It's not just a lack of noise, it's a signal. I've outgrown this. Imagine trying to light a match in a storm. That's what their manipulation looked like. Fragile, outdated, no longer effective. You were the storm now. You didn't need revenge. You didn't need to clap back. Your self-control, your peace, your non-reaction, that's what tore through their illusion. Not because you were weak, but because you were way too strong to entertain that level of energy ever again. They thought they knew you, but they only knew the version of you that hadn't healed yet, the version that hadn't cried it all out, the version that hadn't sat in the fire and learned how to stop running. But now, you've mastered your mind. You don't react on impulse. You move with intent. You don't fight for attention. You protect your peace. They played psychological games. You brought emotional chess. So now they're stuck in confusion. Why didn't that work? Why won't they take the bait? Why do they seem more powerful the less they speak? Because control over your past gives you control over your future. And that's exactly what you did. You reclaimed every memory they tried to use against you. You pulled every trigger out of their hands. And now they're standing in front of you with the same tired tactics while you're holding a blueprint for your own freedom. Let them weaponize your story. You already turned it into fuel. Let them talk about who you were. You're too busy becoming someone even stronger. They tried to hijack your emotions. Instead, you showed them what true emotional mastery looks like. And now they realize you don't just understand yourself. You own yourself. And no one can fake power around someone who actually has it. Number 5. You saw who was really pulling the strings, and you cut every one of them. It wasn't just them, it was who sent them. They thought they were clever. You saw the pattern. They thought they were hiding, but you saw the hand behind the mask. This wasn't just one person betraying you. It wasn't random jealousy or petty gossip. This was a setup designed to keep you doubting yourself, trapped in cycles, and drained of your power. And once you started seeing the pattern, the whole thing started to crumble. You didn't just catch one liar. You traced the lies back to where they were manufactured. You didn't just hear one insult. You felt the recycled energy, reused by different faces, different voices, but with the same script. That's when you knew this was deeper. It was never about the messenger. It was about the message, the manipulation, the agenda, the repetition. You saw the playbook. Same timing, same tactics, same emotional triggers, different people, same play. You weren't just dealing with broken people. You were dealing with an invisible system, a strategy meant to keep you small, reactive, and distracted. When the attacks get smarter, it means your awakening is working. Imagine waking up and realizing every argument, every betrayal, every draining interaction was connected, like different actors reading from the same cursed script. That moment when you see the strings, that's when the show stops being entertainment and starts becoming a threat. But you didn't flinch. You cut the strings and walked off the stage. They thought you'd stay confused. They wanted you chasing faces, blaming individuals, losing energy on symptoms, but you went for the source. And once you spotted the source, the entire trap started collapsing in slow motion, because it was never about that one friend, that one ex, that one betrayal. It was about an energy that kept showing up in different disguises, trying to distract you from your growth. But you didn't just survive it, you decoded it. You learned to stop asking, "Why did they do this to me?" and started asking, "Who benefits from me staying hurt, small, and confused?" And the second you did that, you became the threat. They can't manipulate someone who sees the pattern. They can't control someone who's no longer reacting. They can't distract someone who sees through the entire operation. You made the invisible visible, and that's why they're panicking. The puppet show ends when the audience stops clapping. You didn't just stop clapping, you burned the whole tent down. Now you're free, not just from the person, but from the system, from the setup, from the emotional algorithm designed to keep you broken. And once the strings are cut, they can't ever attach again, not unless you tie them yourself. And you won't, because once you see the puppeteer, you never fear the puppet again. Number 6. They built a masterpiece of manipulation, but you were holding the script the whole time. They rehearsed for applause. You were memorizing the plot twists. They thought they had you hypnotized, caught up in their theatrics, blinded by their rehearsed empathy, fooled by the flawless timing of their concern. But what they didn't know is that you had already read this script before. Every line, every plot twist, every character arc. They weren't original, they were predictable, and you weren't confused. You were watching calmly from the front row, taking notes. They performed. You documented. Every apology laced with manipulation, every hug wrapped in guilt, every word crafted to make you feel safe while the trap was being tightened behind the scenes. But your intuition caught it all. The energy didn't match the tone. The compliments came with hesitation. The support felt conditional. You saw the emotional math wasn't adding up, and you didn't even need to solve the equation to know it was off. Intuition doesn't ask for proof. It senses the imbalance before the lie takes shape. Imagine watching a magician perform a trick you already know the secret to. The flash is there, the show looks impressive, but you're not moved, you're not fooled, because you've already seen what's behind the curtain. That's how it felt. You let the act go on. You didn't interrupt, because the truth always stumbles out when liars get too comfortable. They thought silence meant confusion. They thought your lack of reaction meant emotional weakness. But in reality, you had already left the show emotionally before they even hit their climax. You weren't waiting for the truth. You were waiting for them to finally admit it to themselves. And even if they never did, that didn't matter. Because you weren't sitting in judgment. You were sitting in clarity. They wanted a scene. They wanted a moment of chaos. They wanted the breakdown. But instead, you gave them what they feared most: stillness. No fight, no drama, just quiet detachment, the kind that leaves performers trembling after the spotlight fades. You didn't need to end the show. You just stopped buying tickets. You saw the ending coming the moment the curtain rose, and by the time it fell, you were already gone. Not bitter, not broken, just free. Because you know this now, truth doesn't need defense. It doesn't need backup. It shows up when it's ready. And when it does, everything built on lies begins to rot from the inside out. And that's exactly what's happening now. Their story is unraveling. Their performance is collapsing. Because there's no sequel for fake love once the audience knows the script. You weren't their victim. You were the witness. And that's why they're afraid. Because the show's over and you're the one holding the receipts. Number 7. You let the snake in just close enough to kill it. They thought your silence was fear. It was actually aim. You saw them. Not just their face, you saw their intention. Long before the mask slipped, long before the lies tangled themselves up, you felt it. That subtle tension, that energy shift, the off rhythm in their voice. You didn't need proof to feel the danger, but you waited anyway. Not because you were naive, because you were calculating. They don't understand this kind of patience. They mistake stillness for stupidity. They mistake empathy for access. But while they were getting comfortable, drawing closer, testing your boundaries like a thief, scouting an empty house, you were quietly memorizing every move they made. You didn't react because you were still aiming. And when you struck, you didn't miss. Imagine holding a sword, standing perfectly still while the enemy tiptoes closer, thinking you're too scared to fight. That's what this was. Every smile they gave was a hiss. Every gift was bait. Every apology was a test to see how much they could get away with, and you let them come close, so close they thought they were in control, until the moment came and you ended the game in one move. That's what stunned them. You didn't explode, you didn't beg, you didn't warn them. You ended it with precision, with finality, with truth so sharp it split the mask right off their face. They were building a slow-burning lie over weeks, months, maybe years, planning manipulation disguised as reconciliation, positioning themselves as victim, advisor, or savior. But you let the whole thing cook. And when you struck, it was surgical, clean, brutal in its simplicity. And now they know you were never unaware, just unbothered until it was time. You didn't strike from emotion, you struck from awareness. And that kind of hit leaves scars they can't explain. They're rattled, not just because you caught them, but because you played them better than they played you. You let them show their full hand. You let the pattern repeat. You gathered evidence with every interaction. And when it came time to cut ties, you didn't argue. You didn't justify. You just closed the door with a calm that screamed louder than any confrontation ever could. They don't know what to do now. You didn't give them chaos to feed off. You didn't leave wounds to crawl back into. You didn't leave a trail they could manipulate. You left clarity. You left silence. And that silence is echoing through their entire strategy like a funeral bell. Let them hiss. Let them squirm. Let them smear your name out of desperation. They only do that when the one they tried to bite turns out to be the one holding the blade. Number 8. They thought your kindness was a muzzle, but you took it off and spoke the truth. They abused your silence, mistook it for submission. Now they're choking on the truth they thought you'd never speak. They counted on you to stay quiet, to swallow every betrayal, smile through every insult, and keep pretending just to keep the peace. They thought your kindness was weakness, your loyalty was fear, and your silence was protection for them. And maybe once, a long time ago, it was. Maybe you did protect them. Maybe you bit your tongue because you loved them. Maybe you kept their secrets, even when it cost you your sanity. But that version of you is gone, and silence is no longer your love language. You finally realized keeping quiet to protect people who would never protect you is not peace, it's prison, and you broke out. Silence isn't golden when it protects betrayal. They thought you'd never speak. They thought guilt and loyalty would keep you chained. They were so sure you'd prioritize their reputation over your own reality. But now they know you won't bleed quietly for people who'd let you die loudly. The silence they were counting on? Gone. And the truth? You didn't even have to scream it. You just stopped hiding it. Imagine someone building their entire life on a fake image, thinking they're safe because you're too kind to expose them. But then one day you step out of the shadows. You don't attack, You don't lie. You just stop covering for them, and the world sees what you've seen all along. That's not revenge. That's release. That's the moment truth breathes again. And that's what terrifies them most. You didn't destroy their reputation. You just stopped holding it up. They're panicking because your kindness no longer comes with silence. They're spiraling because your peace no longer means protecting dysfunction. They're terrified because you can't be guilt-tripped, manipulated, or loyalty-shamed anymore. When truth becomes more important than image, no one can control you ever again. You didn't lash out. You didn't plot revenge. You didn't stoop to their level. You just stood up and let the truth do what it does best. Shine light on every corner they swore would stay dark. And the truth is this: they never protected you. So now you no longer protect them. Let them panic. Let them scream. Let them scramble for damage control. They had their chance to move right, to act with honor, to tell the truth themselves. They didn't, and now the silence that once shielded them has turned into a mirror they can't look into. Number 9. They tried to make you explode, but you stayed calm and set off their collapse. They lit the match and waited for you to burn, but all that caught fire was their own mask. They pushed every button, picked at every scar, threw low blows behind smiling faces, all to provoke a reaction, a meltdown, a scene, something loud and messy they could point to and say, "See? This is why I did what I did." That was the plan. That was always the plan. Trigger the chosen one and blame them for the fallout. But what they weren't prepared for was your stillness. You didn't explode. You didn't defend. You didn't perform. You stood there, solid as a wall, and let them unravel themselves. You didn't lose your mind. You found your center, and they couldn't stand it. They expected rage. You gave them silence. They expected chaos. You gave them clarity. And that silence, that's what broke them. Because guilt screams when truth doesn't flinch. Imagine trying to stage a fire by pouring gasoline on someone, but they don't ignite. They just stare, calm, unmoved, and suddenly all the smoke starts coming from you. That's what happened. Every time they tried to frame you, they slipped. Their stories changed, their tone cracked, their contradictions piled up, and all the eyes they tried to deceive, they started to see the truth. You didn't fight for the spotlight. You became the spotlight, and under that pressure, they crumbled. Calmness in the face of manipulation is the loudest form of truth. They needed you to lash out. They needed to provoke you into reacting so they could paint themselves as the victim, the misunderstood one, the poor soul dealing with your issues. But when you stayed cool, that storyline fell apart. Suddenly, all their fake concern looked theatrical. All their fake kindness looked forced. All their lies, now under a microscope. They tried to trigger your destruction and ended up triggering their own exposure. That's the real reason they're panicking now. Not because of what you did, but because of what you didn't do. You didn't scream. You didn't break down. You didn't act out. You held your ground. Let the truth sit in the room like smoke, and let them be the one who couldn't breathe. You never had to call them out. You just had to outlast the performance. And when it ended, the room was still. No applause, no more illusion, just a trail of lies, guilt, and manipulation, fully exposed under the light of your peace. They planned the trigger, but the only explosion was the collapse of their own character. Number 10. They designed your downfall, but the universe flipped the script. They built the ending. The universe rewrote it and made you the main character. They planned everything, Like directors casting a scene, they picked the players, scripted the betrayal, set the tone for your collapse. They wanted the world to watch you fall. Isolation, humiliation, heartbreak. That was the arc they designed. A tragic ending for the one they secretly feared. They didn't just want you broken, they wanted it to look like you broke yourself. But what they didn't factor in was the plot twist. Right when it looked like they had won, when your name was in everyone's mouth for all the wrong reasons, when doors started closing, when even your own shadow felt distant, that's when everything shifted. And it didn't happen with noise. It happened in silence, behind the scenes. Quiet redirection, unexpected opportunities, random coincidences that weren't coincidences at all. Because while they were still obsessed with controlling the perception, the universe was already working on the truth. The same stage built for your humiliation became the platform for your rebirth. People started waking up. The same ones who believed the lies started noticing the gaps, the inconsistencies, the tension in the storytellers' voices, the shame hiding behind their fake concern. And one by one, they started looking back at you, not with pity, but with curiosity. Because while they were watching for your breakdown, you elevated. You didn't retaliate. You didn't explain. You just became undeniable. And there's no louder revenge than growth that can't be denied. You glowed different. You walked different. You moved with purpose, no longer desperate for validation or acceptance. You didn't need to clear your name because your name carried truth the longer it stayed in silence. Imagine them planning your ending like a funeral and then being forced to watch you resurrect. Better, sharper, stronger, untouchable. That's what happened. Their plan backfired in real time. They wanted to be crowned in your downfall. Instead, they got exposed in your comeback. The setup wasn't your ending. It was just your edit point, and now the real story begins. That's what's driving them mad. You were supposed to lose everything. You were supposed to vanish quietly, but you rose, and in doing so, you turned the entire script against them. And maybe they'll never admit it, but they know now. They triggered something that ended up being divine timing in disguise. That betrayal cracked open a deeper version of you. That isolation forced your evolution. That smear campaign revealed their own reflection. So let them sit with the plot they designed. Let them re-watch the scenes they directed. Let them replay the finale they wrote for you. Because you're not in their movie anymore. You're in your own saga now. One built on truth. One they can't narrate. One they're no longer cast in. They designed the setup, but the universe, in perfect, quiet, poetic timing, flipped the script. And this time, you don't just survive, you lead. Number 11. You weren't sent to break, you were sent to see everything. You weren't punished, you were positioned, not to suffer, but to witness. They thought you were the target, that the chaos around you was meant to destroy you, humble you, finish you. But the truth is far more unsettling. You were never the one under attack. You were the one taking notes. You weren't in that storm by accident. You were placed there on purpose, not to drown, but to observe. Every betrayal you experienced wasn't just heartbreak, it was revelation. Every silence, every shift in loyalty, every carefully timed absence was data. And while you were being tested, you were also being shown who was real and who was wearing the costume of real. They thought they were hiding it well, but you weren't confused. You were collecting proof. It wasn't your downfall, it was your field study. And they had no idea they were exposing themselves to someone chosen to see, not to react, but to record. Imagine being sent into a burning building, not to be consumed, but to study the flames, to understand what causes it, who lit it, who watches it burn with a smile. That's what this journey was. You weren't put in the chaos to break, you were put there to learn who causes it. And now you know, now you've seen behind the curtain. That's why your peace is unsettling to them. That's why your silence rattles the walls. Because your calm doesn't come from ignorance, it comes from clarity. You didn't lash out because you didn't need to. You didn't seek revenge because you didn't have to. Your healing was the closing statement. Your growth was the proof. Your survival, the undeniable receipt. The moment you realized you were the witness, not the victim, everything changed. And now they're scrambling, because the one they thought would fall apart is still standing, stronger, smarter, and sharper than ever. Not bitter, just done playing blind. You didn't lose your mind, you gained vision. You didn't beg for revenge. You became the evidence that justice already happened. You were sent into the fire to observe the architects of destruction, and now that you've seen what they truly are, you'll never be fooled again. Let them live with the fact that you saw it all and walked away without dragging anyone, without exposing anything, just holding truth like a mirror they can't unsee. They thought you were broken, but you were built for this. You weren't meant to fall. You were meant to see everything, and now you do. Number 12. They're not just mad, they're shattered because you survived. They put everything into your ending and ended up watching your evolution. They gave it everything they had, every lie, every manipulation, every smear campaign, all of it, carefully crafted, obsessively rehearsed. Their strategy wasn't casual, it was personal. They didn't just want you to lose. They needed you to break, emotionally, mentally, publicly. That was the win they were counting on. But instead of breaking down, you leveled up. They plotted your collapse like a movie. You flipped the script and walked out of the fire as the director. They didn't see the real threat wasn't your reaction. It was your refusal to fold. You didn't scream. You didn't explain. You didn't chase justice. You stood still and let everything they built unravel on its own. Because when someone's lying that hard, all you have to do is stay silent long enough, and the cracks will scream for you. And that's exactly what happened. Their alliances, fragile. Their lies, sloppy. Their guilt, loud. Because what was once whispered about you is now being whispered about them. Imagine putting all your energy into someone's destruction and then watching them glow brighter than ever. That's what they're living with now. That's the part they can't stand. They wanted to be the reason you gave up. Now they have to live, knowing they were the reason you grew up. The trap didn't fail because it was weak. It failed because you were too evolved to fall for it. They thought you'd come back begging. They thought you'd collapse trying to clear your name, but you let the dust settle, and when it did, you were still standing, smarter, sharper, untouchable, and now they're haunted by the truth. Not only did they fail, they exposed themselves trying to take you out. They didn't just lose control of the narrative, they lost control of you. Because you're not reactive anymore, you're not confused, you're free. And that scares them more than any revenge ever could. Let them be furious. Let them replay every move. Let them sit in the silence they created. Because now they know you were the storm they thought they could contain. And the fact that you're still here, still rising, still choosing peace over payback, that's what's destroying them now. And now, here we are, at the end of their plan, but the beginning of your rise. Everything they tried failed, not because they were weak, but because you became stronger than they ever expected. You didn't just survive the setup, you saw through it, outgrew it, and walked out untouched. That's power, that's clarity, that's you. If this message hit home, like the video, subscribe for more, and drop 77 in the comments if you've outgrown everything they once used against you. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. The trap failed. Now it's your turn to rise.